Well, speaking of mothers, before we close up shop, if not ship, this particular week or for this particular show, we got to go back to Uncle Dave's current issue is out of his newsletter where the Observer Reader Awards are given. Now, these are not Dave's choices himself. These are voted on by the readers. And in a lot of cases, Brian, I think you'll agree that you get the element of the preacher polling the choir as to whether they believe in God. This is somewhat of a target audience that's going to lean a certain way for the most part, and always pretty much has. But in some of them, I don't know if I'm detecting some of these categories. We're not going to go through this whole thing. There's quite a few, folks. But there's some that tickles me because it's almost like they've got two groups now trying to pull for supremacy in some of these categories. Two groups of readers. The kids that, like with Big John Gaborik we were talking about earlier in the show, where the kids thought that because he was on television at one point, he actually was in the wrestling business and knew something. The kids that think that Dave is a guru, and the more grown-ups and or longer-time fans who may have a more logical approach who think, what the fuck are you talking about? It just seems to me, except when there's some categories here where I think the biggest vote getter amongst that group might be none of the fucking above. But would we be boring the people if we just peruse a few of these choices?
No, I think the listeners love hearing about this each and every year, and I think you kind of have a few categories. One, I think the majority of the Observer readers don't vote, and that needs to be said. And then amongst the people that vote, there are people that follow wrestling news and follow wrestling and read the Observer. There are also, while Dave doesn't pick the winners, anyone who thinks that's an idiot, there is certainly a sect of fans that subscribe to Dave's exact brand of wrestling snobbery.
Yes, yes.
And that's kind of what it is. You know, I was thinking about it because I showed my daughter the other day Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. And she was enthralled with it. The whole story behind it, because they have a little video package just to show, with no real reasoning, actually, when you think about it, why they hate each other now. And I'm thinking, wow, the Observer and Dave and the readers, I mean, Dave, whatever he gave it at the time, -5 stars. It was the worst match of the year. I feel like people didn't like it. But then, like, there's a whole nother fan base, a much bigger one, that loved it, that appreciates it. Again, there were no high spots, except for a body slam. That was it. But it's a form of wrestling snobbery, and this is where kind of everything conflicts with whoever actually votes for this. I have them in front of me here.
Well, I do also, and I want to bring up a couple here. Just the placement of the big one is the Wrestler of the Year award, which he now calls the Lou Thesz / Ric Flair award. The Wrestler of the Year. Well, one would think by those 4 words, description, Wrestler of the Year, that this would be pretty much the greatest, the most important, the biggest wrestler of the past year in the world of wrestling, right? By the way that sounds.
Right.
Okay, and the number 1 winner with 3,385 votes or points or whatever, and
no, those are points.
The points, yeah, 577. See, again, Dave he missed his opportunity trying to help fucking Einstein work out mathematical equations. He can't just fucking vote for the guy you like, right? It's determined by points on a 5-3-2 basis with first place votes in parentheses and whatever the fuck that gibberish means, right? But it works out in his mind. Cody Rhodes won the thing. And you can argue with that. You can debate that with a few other people, you know, but you can't really scoff at it because Cody's the champion of the biggest company, blah, blah, blah. Then number 2, Will Ospreay, with about half as many first place votes and somehow only 800 less overall points. But, and I'm not knocking Osprey, but when I say this, but here you've got the AEW faction that's going to vote for the guy they like, and in this case, probably they were split between him and a couple other people. And you've got the more broad fan who realizes that, say what you want, but the top guys have to be the ones in the top company in most, but not all cases. But here's who Osprey's ahead of. Number 3, Bryan Danielson. Okay, for his one match he had last year or whatever the fuck it was, or 2 matches, let's give him that. Number 4, Mystico. Number 5, Swerve Strickland, Wrestler of the Year. Number 6, Zack Sabre Jr. And then number 7, Roman Reigns. So Roman Reigns didn't have a year that would determine he placed higher as Wrestler of the Year than Zack Sabre Jr., Swerve Strickland, and Mystico. And Bryan Danielson, I know there's a sentimental factor there. And then number 8 is Sarii. Who the fuck is Sarii?
I'm sure she's a she from Japan, if I had to guess.
Well, she placed ahead of Gunther at number 9. And at number 10, a tie between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. So when you're talking about Wrestler of the Year, the 2 guys that were in possibly the greatest WWE match of at least the year and was the hottest feud and have drawn incredible amounts of money, sold merchandise, but they're behind Sarii and Zack Sabre Jr. down tied for 10th.
Hold on, I'm reading what Dave actually wrote here. He compares Cody being number 1 and Will Ospreay being number 2 to Joe DiMaggio versus Ted Williams in 41 for the American League.
Yes, because Dave was covering baseball at the time.
No, but I mean, it's a historical season. I mean, everyone knows about what happened. I wouldn't consider Cody Rhodes and Will Ospreay. This is nothing.
What kind of medication does Dave Meltzer need to be on that the closest comparison that he can come up with to write about between this two is a 1941 battle for the American League MVP?
Yeah.
The fuck is that some shit that fucking Dr. Leary made?
Oh, just for the record, too, you left off some honorable mentions. Tam Nakano got 120 votes, followed by Tetsuya Naito with 73, and Mayu Iwatani with 65.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. You got the Cody Rhodes and CM Punk and Drew McIntyre part of the voting base that is going to, in some way, vote for Wrestler of the Year to be one of the great wrestlers of the business. And then you've got the crowd that wants to vote for, Miyu Iwatani and the Sarii.
The people who had their favorite matches. I mean, should Wrestler of the Year be who had your favorite matches throughout the year, or should it be, because there used to be, I don't think it still exists, reader's personal favorite wrestler.
Well, I think he's changed some names to be more politically correct. I think we'll get into that in a second. But anyway, that's that. And here is what the point I'm going to make. Most outstanding wrestler. Now, when you change the category to most outstanding wrestler, guess who won? Will Ospreay. But it was by a wider margin over Bryan Danielson and then Take a Shit and Zack Sabre Jr. and Sarii and Gunther's at number 6. Swerve, Mayu Iwatani, Hechechechia. And then tied for number 10, CM Punk and Cody Rhodes for most outstanding wrestler. But the point is, if you say most outstanding wrestler, then that doesn't mean, okay, he's not the biggest box office draw. He's not the overall wrestler of the year. But Will Ospreay, he does all that shit, and he performs at a high athletic level. You can at least make a case for that. But still, when you've got a readership that is voting for Hichichichia over Cody Rhodes, the biggest fucking babyface star on the known planet, Give me a break. Tag team of the year, Brian. Can we talk about this for a second?
Oh yeah, according to Dave, it was a record-breaking. They broke their previous record. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like a fucking idiot Rand Paul from Kentucky. He wanted to be a board-certified ophthalmologist, so he had his wife start a board and they certified him. The tag team of the year was once again for, what was it? I think is the eighth year in a war. Eighth year they won the award, but not eighth year in a row.
Yeah, that's right. FTR got it the last 2 years.
Yes, but a record-winning eighth year for the Young Bucks. Maddie and Nick, hold on. Let's everybody. That's actually that's legitimate audio of the crowd applauding at the last show that they main evented. The Young Bucks win it narrowly now with 352 first place votes and 2,449 overall points. They narrowly edged out Nathan Frazier and Axiom with 337 and 2320 respectively. And I said, and then I realized, do you know, Brian, who Nathan Frazier and Axiom are?
Not only do I know who they are, I think you've asked me this exact question like 3 or 4 times in the last few months.
Basically,
you never.
They are the two guys. When we watched NXT last a while back, for some reason, I said, and then up on the screen pops up two guys that these. Neither one of them looked in any way like they should be a professional athlete, and I thought something basically to the effect of the show should have been kicked off the air by the FCC for presenting them on the television. They are the tag team that came in second place. Apparently, again, all of the regular wrestling fans checked out on this because there are no tag teams. So you got the trained chimpanzee fans voting for the little weird-looking fucks that do all the jumping up and down, but there's no serious choice. Listen, Young Bucks were number 1. Nathan Frazier and Axiom, number 2. FTR, who, as you said, won it the last 2 years in a row, number 3. And I mean, again, if you go on who, when presented with any competent tag team, can perform better in the ring than any other tag team, yeah, you got to go with FTR, because as we're seeing a dearth of competition, but the way that they've been presented and everything that we've bemoaned, the tag team of the year in previous years would have had to been a top tag team that was working in main events, that was drawing money, that was having great match. Now it's just we reward the guys that can do it if they ever get a chance, just because everybody else is the shits. And then number 4, Sting and Darby Allin. They had like fucking 3 tag team matches together. Number 5, June and Rei Saito. They sound like a happily married Japanese couple. Number 6, Hazuki and Koguma. Number 7, Dragon Kid and Naruki Doi. Number
I don't know why that one got me.
Well, I think, or is that Naroi Dookie? Number 8, Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley, the poor machine guns, were outrated by Hazuki and Koguma and Dookie. Number 9, the Outrunners. Number 10, Kevin Koo and Dominic Guarini. And what? So that's what they want. Here's the previous winners, Brian. Let's just go back to the original winner in 1980, the Freebirds, Gordy and Roberts.
How does that work, by the way?
In the corner.
Dave didn't have a newsletter until 83, right? Late 82?
Well, he was doing, I think he had a previous incarnation of some type of newsletter that did something, and he's folded that in. They absorbed the historical lineage. Don't fucking doubt Dave Meltzer's record keeping. But the point is, listen to these names of these teams. 1981, Terry Gordy and Jimmy Snuka. They weren't the biggest drawing tag team of that year, but I remember seeing that they were the best in the ring. 1982, Stan Hansen and Ole Anderson. They were on top in Georgia. Everybody was watching TBS at that point. 83, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. In the ring, one of the all-time greatest babyface teams. They didn't draw money all over the country, but 83 was the year that they did such incredible business in the Carolinas. You draw 20,000 people with the turnaways in Greensboro for a house show. 1984, the Road Warriors. 85, the British Bulldogs, Dynamite and Davey. 86, Midnight Express, Condrey and Eaton. 87, Midnight Express, Lane and Eaton. 88, Midnight Express, Lane and Eaton. 89, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, the Rockers. 90, the Steiner Brothers. And then the decade of the 90s, as Dave's fascination with the Land of the Rising Sun grew, it was dominated most of the time by Japanese teams, except 93, the Hollywood Blondes, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin. And even then, in modern times, we get to Edge and Christian, who were a hell of a team in 2002 or 2000, or the Guerreros. Mark and Jay Briscoe one year, the American Wolves, Edwards and Richards. But now, the Shield, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns from 2013. But now it's dominated by Dave's favorite stepsons, the Buckaroos, and unknown foreign teams that wrestle in the subconsciouses of a lot of these people's joyless lives. There ain't no tag teams.
Well, yeah, that's part of the problem right there. If you go back to that, all the teams that won in the 80s, you guys won a bunch of times, Davey Boy and Dynamite. You could think of multiple other top tag teams that were around. Heart Foundation, yes. Not even on this list. Not once.
Oh, because the top 5, 6, or 7 was so deep.
Yeah.
With guys like the Heart Foundation or the Fantastics or the fucking on and on.
I mean,
the
year the Road Warriors won in 84, Midnight Express very easily could have won in 84. You know what I mean? Like, there are multiple options for those years. Right now, Tag Team of the Year is a team that caused the ratings to go down every time they were on. I think that was the case this past year in 2024. Had to be taken off TV because that just seems to happen a lot for them. Then they started wrestling in Japan again. No one cares about them in Japan. That's the Tag Team of the Year. It's a issue where Dave loves the Young Bucks and there's people that adopt Dave's view on what wrestling is good and what isn't, but it's also a very sad commentary on the state of wrestling. WWE can sign tag teams, but that Motor City Machine Guns DIY match had the quietest crowd reaction at a WWE show I've ever seen.
Well, to paraphrase the Seinfeld, Ray, it's not the taking of the reservation, it's the holding of the reservation. It's not the signing of the talent, it's the using of the talent. And tag teams are always presented as the Cheetah segment in the Tarzan movie, except if it's 2 big singles guys teaming up against 2 other big singles guys.
And right now, AEW has a new thing with the Hurt Syndicate. So far, it's working. Again, whenever you see whatever you see from this past week, the crowd's reacting to these guys, as always, as every week they're on. Unless they do something stupid, I transition back to the Bucks, which...
No, I heard the Bucks have already transitioned.
But if there was ever a match for Shelton and Bobby Lashley to go into business for themselves... But the point is, there aren't 2 really good dedicated tag team divisions that are booked well. There are individual teams that have short runs, and then everything falls apart. That's something that's been missing now. It's almost a generation without well thought out tag team wrestling. Not to say that, FTR can't go out there and rock the house with a great match, but there's no classic feud. Like, there's no feuds beyond, we're going to wrestle you because we think we're better, and now we have to show it. And that's, I get it, that's great, and, sports-based wrestling, but this is pro wrestling. There's never anything other than them getting laid out. They're a great tag team, but there's not a great tag team division.
Well, and here's another thing, and we'll pick and choose a few more of these. The promotion of the year in a runaway 570 first place votes to 212 and 3801 points to 2406 was the WWE over AEW. So much of Dave's audience recognizes and it, just is realistic enough to come to grips with that. Yes, they're the best promotion. And then the other large group is, we're the AEW guys. And then CMLL came close to AEW. And then it was New Japan, Stardom, UFC, TNA, Dragon Gate, All Japan, Rev Pro, Sendai Girls got 70 points.
No GLEAT.
GLEAT did not place. But at the same time, as they vote in that respect, the very next category is Best Weekly TV Show, and AEW Dynamite comes in at number 1, blowing away WWE SmackDown. And remember, this was last year. That was SmackDown was at least 2 hours on network instead of 3 hours and boring the fuck out of us. But if you add up Raw and SmackDown together, the first place votes don't add up to what Dynamite got, and the points would come about even. And so they know the top promotion, but they still didn't like the TV shows, but they thought AEW Dynamite was great because what Dave says, this shows that voters here are going to vote for the show that has the best in-ring wrestling. And even with its issues, Dynamite's in-ring quality and high-end matches blew away the competition. He legitimately believes that there are just loads and loads of good matches, great matches, on that television show. And it's like, I don't know, maybe if you're just a blasé basketball fan and some team gets a 7-foot-tall guy that looks great, and every time you throw him the ball, he doesn't have to dribble. He can just run down and dunk it. And you don't care, then maybe that's it. That's a great basketball game. But how can he be ignoring the parts in all of these matches where everything is the same, and they ignore the referee, and they ignore the counts, they ignore the rules, and the work looks like shit, and the blows miss, and the fucking cooperation is there for all to see because they do a bunch of fucking moves and fall through some shit? How can you judge that as high-end wrestling?
That's the problem. That's what Tony is booking towards. It's Dave and the readership that Tony's a part of, the ones who kind of have adopted Meltzerism in terms of the way you're supposed to think about what's good and what isn't. That's why WWE blows them away as the best promotion, but their shows don't stand a chance against Dynamite. And by the way, how serious are the voters? Rampage is on this list.
Well, yeah, to finish it out, 2 is SmackDown, 3 is Raw, 4 is CMLL, 5 is Collision, 6 is NXT, Rampage and Impact tied for 8, 9 New Japan, and 10 ROH Honor Club. Got 29 points. And the pro wrestling match of the year. Okay, the greatest match of the year. Will Ospreay versus Bryan Danielson from St. Louis. I'm sure we watched it and saw it. I don't remember what happened. But that match, and Bryan Danielson versus Swerve Strickland in London, was number 2, and Sting and Darby Allin against the Young Bucks is number 3, and Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. from Osaka is number 4. So Danielson in 3 out of the 4, a very sentimental voting block this year. But number 5, Punk versus Drew McIntyre in Atlanta, the Hell in a Cell. The show that show there had more viewers and grossed more money than all these other fucking shows put together. Well, I know Greensboro was big for AEW, but... And then Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns from WrestleMania. is behind that, followed by Osprey versus Take a Shit, Michael Oku versus Will Osprey, MJF versus Will Osprey. I remember was better than Osprey and Danielson, wasn't it?
I thought so, but again,
things?
I thought the exact same thing, but I remember went through a period where I got really bored with Danielson and got sick of his matches.
Yeah. And then Osprey
became self-indulgent,
Okada.
which all became self-indulgent. At least that's the way I thought. And then he did interviews saying, "Oh yeah, I was just doing this all for me." So that's what it felt like.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the top 10 have Osprey. 1, 2, 3. 3 of the top 10 had Danielson, but right in the middle is the 2 matches, Punk and Drew and Cody and Roman Reigns, that everybody fucking saw.
Hey, you skipped past it, but you are a multiple-time winner. I got to know your thoughts on Best on Interviews. Number 1, Drew McIntyre.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did skip over that, did I not? Yeah, Best on Interviews, Drew McIntyre. I can't argue with that because not only has he been fantastic, but the difference in him from before was remarkable. But and then you can, number 2, The Rock. Well, he did a few interviews. He wasn't there all year, but The Rock's always, except for that NXT thing, Rock's always good. But then I'm going to save a name because I'm going to then go to the names that this guy placed higher than. Will Ospreay, well, I'm sorry. As Mama Cornette would say, he couldn't say Suey if the Hogs had him most of the time because you don't know, Ospreay. But Ospreay placed above CM Punk in Best on Interviews, followed by Cody Rhodes, followed by Toni Storm. I don't know if you could call it best or whatever, but she did interviews. MJF, even though he's been diminished, one of the top wordsmiths of the modern era, Swerve Strickland, and Paul Heyman at number 10. Paul Heyman, legitimately, they ought to just make it the Heyman fucking award, but I'm sure he would be humble enough to want somebody else to get it. But the guy that came in number 3 and placed ahead of Paul Heyman, MJF, Cody Rhodes, and CM Punk, Hangman Adam Page. What the? So that it's nonsense. And you talked about an award that ought to be named after me. That one actually really shouldn't because I only want it. Let's see. Hold on. 81 was Albano and Piper. 82 was Piper. 83 was Piper. 84 was Jimmy Hart. 85 was me. 86 was me. 87 was me. 88 was me. But 89 was Terry Funk. And 90 was Arn. And 91 was Flair. 92 was Flair. 93 was me. But they shouldn't name that award after me. Let's talk about the award they should name after me. Now, think about this, Brian. They've got the Lou Thez and Ric Flair Award for Wrestler of the Year. They have hold on, I'm flipping through it. They got the Hodge Award, the Danny Hodge Award for a non-heavyweight MVP. They got the Koichi Yoshizawa Award for the Japanese MVP.
And he wasn't a wrestler, for anyone who doesn't know who Koichi was. The rest of these guys are all wrestlers.
Yeah, no, Koichi was a reporter. He was friends of ours. Bryan Danielson Award for the best technical wrestler. Did the best brawler used to be the Bruiser Brody Award, but They
do have best brawler. Actually, best brawler, the Bruiser Brody Award is still here. That is still one of the wrestlers.
Okay, well, I couldn't find it, but the award I'm talking about that ought to be named after me, the best non-wrestler award. It used to be back in the old days, the manager of the year, and then they became no manager. Now it's best non-wrestler. And I demand to stake my claim because it's going to be either me or Haymon. We're going to count them up right now. Because in the best non-wrestler category, number 1, Paul Heyman, and I agree wholeheartedly. Number 2, Don Callis, and I'm embarrassed for the state of the business that...
Give me a break.
He would place number 2. Number 3, Prince Nana, poor fella. Number 4, Renee Moxley Good. Number 5 MVP.
Well, hold on. Well, hold on.
Now?
Everyone's a manager. She's an announcer. She's not even a commentator announcer. She's an interviewer.
She's just a mere commentator.
She's an interviewer. She stands there with a microphone.
Well, she's the best non-wrestler. That's where we're at these days. You know, number 5 MVP. Boy, Jesus Christ. They must be mad at MVP. Number 6, Nick Aldis. Number 7, Key Melito. I don't even know who that is. And number 8, Samantha Irvin. And that's all. And they didn't even have any runner-ups. So, as I said, it was in the 80s and 90s. It was the Manager of the Year award. And then it became the best non-wrestler after a couple of years on the shelf. So let's count these things up. Okay, Brian, can you do this? Help me. 1983 was Jimmy Hart, Manager of the Year. Then I was the Manager of the Year in 1984, 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, and 1990. So that's 7, right? Mark that down. And then, as everybody knows, I took 1991 off because I left WCW and I was setting up Smoky Mountain Wrestling. So that year was sensational Sherry Martel, who won for her fine work with that. That year was Savage, right?
1991, it was Savage until Savage retired, and then it was Ted DiBiase.
There you go. And then I won in 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995, and 1996. Now, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's another 5. So then they reinstated it in 1999 as the Best Non-Wrestler Award. And 1999 was Vince McMahon, and 2000 was Vince McMahon. Then 2001 was Paul Heyman. And 2002 was Paul Heyman. So Paul's got 2. Mark 2 down. What am I at, 12?
Yes,
help me.
You're at 12. Heyman's at 2.
All righty. 2003 was Steve Austin, because that's when he was injured, but he was still a part of the deal. 2004, Paul Heyman. That makes 3 for him. 2005, Eric Bischoff. 2006, Jim Cornette. For what I was doing in TNA, I'm 13 now. 2007, Larry Sweeney. 2008, Larry Sweeney, Ring of Honor manager. 2009 and 10, Vicky Guerrero. My God, it was the dark ages. 2011, Ricardo Rodriguez. 2012 and 13 and 14, Paul Heyman. There's 3 more for him. That makes 5, right?
No, that makes...
No, 6.
That makes 7.
Hold on. Here, 2001 and 2 and 4 and 12 and 13 and 14. So wait, hold on. That's 6.
You know what? You're right.
Well, son of a bitch, then you threw me all off, and I was right. 2015 was Dario Cueto. I think I was at Lucha Underground horseshit. And 2016, too. What was his name?
He had a bright future. Dario Cueto.
Yeah, well, he got it for 2 years because nothing else was happening. 2017, Daniel Bryan. That's when he was hurt, I guess. But then 18, Heyman, 19, Heyman. So there's 2 more. That makes 8, right? 20, Taz. 21, Heyman, and 22, Heyman. There's 10. 23, Callis. And 24, Paul Heyman. I got him 13 to 11. That's what I'm saying. So why don't they rename it? I think there should be a write-in campaign.
The Cornette Heyman Award?
No, just Cornette. Fuck. I edged it. He's got 2 more years to fucking...
I thought you were going to share it with him.
Plus, I had I had the most consecutive run in the history of these things. Anyway, there's some other stuff here. Is it any of it of any importance?
No. Best television announcer, Nigel McGuinness. That's a surprise.
Oh, well, yeah. Hold on now. I've flipped ahead and I've lost where you are. Actually, it's not a surprise because think of the state of the announcers these days. Nigel does a good job. He
acting like a heel, yelling at you.
Well, when he's allowed to be serious and has something to talk about. But then number 2, Excalibur. I mean, say what you want about Michael Cole, but he's more professional and more talented at commentating on television than Excalibur. And Ian Riccaboni, he came in below Michael Cole and Excalibur. Who the fuck is Walker Stewart?
I don't know. Sounds like a fake name.
Boy. Worst television announcer, Booker T. They don't like him much.
He's bad. I hate to say it, but he's really bad.
Yeah, but
McAfee's awful too, and he's number 2.
But Excalibur is number 4, and how can you not think that Excalibur is worse than McAfee?
I can't disagree with that.
Okay.
Excalibur sucks. He's trash as a commentator. How does Shivani not win this?
Well, how does Shivani get 7? Because he doesn't really do that much.
Again, 30 people, which means that he got to be 7 on the list for best television announcer. 30 people said Tony Schiavone is the best television announcer. They shouldn't be allowed to vote.
Well, Chris Charlton, who is the New Japan English commentator, right?
Yeah, he's the one who got in trouble for ripping on Tony and AEW.
Yeah, but is he actually on television?
He's on, I don't know. I don't know if he was doing when they were on Access. I don't know.
I think it's the streaming service. So he can't be on the worst television announcer list because he's not even a television announcer. See, I found a loophole, save him a lot of embarrassment.
It may be time for Dave to retire the word television from the awards.
Worst television show, at least they were honest, AEW Rampage. Worst feud of the year, Adam Cole versus MJF. Can't argue with that. Death Riders versus AEW came in 3rd, underneath Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan. People got tired of that one, apparently. Chris Jericho versus Hook, The Elite versus Tony Khan, Bayley versus Nia Jax, CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre. Got 18 votes for the worst feud of the year, along with the Acclaimed versus the Bang Bang Gang and the Usos against each other. The best booker apparently is...
Yeah, by the way, that one worst match of the year too, Uso versus Uso at WrestleMania, that awful match.
Yes, and it wasn't the worst, it was the worst match of the year that anybody saw.
Okay, yes.
But there were much worse. So that one's really, that's why these a lot of these are opinions only. Other more horrific things have taken place, but people didn't know about it. There was no evidence. And I said Paul Levesque got best booker of the year, as one would imagine, but Tony Khan got number 2. Is that like?
Yeah, but it falls off from there. Who else are? Look at the list.
Well, I was about to say I'll read the rest of these names, but it points out that Tony Khan is coming in number 2, doing work that would be hard to place 3rd in a 2-horse race. It's Paul Levesque. Tony Khan. Number 3 is Taro Okada. Number 4, Julio Cesar Rivera and Juan Manuel Mar. Number 5, Shawn Michaels, down there in NXT, bless his little pea-picking cockeyed heart. Number 6, Sari. So apparently Sari is not only placing on the Wrestler of the Year list, but she's also one of the best bookers. And confusingly similar numbers of votes on each of these. I think Sari has a big family. Then Guido. Then number 8 is this a 5-way tie? Everybody's got 13. Who are these people? James Darrell, Anthony Douglas, John Budd, Mick Maynard, and Sean Shelby.
I don't think that would be a tie. I think that would be that they are all one collective that booked together.
Well, but there's no number 9. Who are these people? And number 10, Andy Quilden. The fuck is going on here?
There aren't a lot of bookers.
Previous winners: 1986, Dusty Rhodes; 1987, Vince McMahon; 1988, Eddie Gilbert; 1989, Giant Baba; 1990, Giant Baba; 1991, Giant Baba; 1992, Ricky Choshu; 1993, Jim Cornette. Hey, that's me. 1994, Paul Haymon; 95, Paul Haymon; 96, Paul Haymon; 97, Paul Haymon; 98, Vince McMahon; 99, Vince McMahon; 2000, Vince McMahon; 2001, Jim Cornette; 2002, Paul Haymon; 2003, Jim Cornette. And then Gabe Sapolsky takes a run for 3 or 4 years. I don't see Andy Quilden and fucking Mick Maynard on this goddamn list.
Do you consider Vince McMahon a booker? From you being there when, you were helping with the booking, do you consider Vince the booker?
Yeah. There is an asterisk that can go beside that placement, because Vince was he was never the booker, but he was the overlord. So, but at the same point, Triple H has a lot of help now. He's not sitting down and doing the complete booking job, because you can't in a company this big with this many people at this point. Triple H is probably putting in more valuable input about the flavor of things and the top matches and the way that they're doing things than Vince was for quite some time. And he probably has his inner circle of go-to people that are formulating a lot of the rest of it. But if he can win this year, Vince could win those years, because it's still kind of the same position. It's just always been done a little different in that company.
So who would have won in 84, Bill Watts or Bill Dundee?
That would have been Dundee, because he was selling Watts on these ideas and Watts was tweaking them, but Dundee was still in effect the booker. He didn't have the final say on anything. Watts had the final say on everything, but he was unmolested in almost everything that he wanted to do, even though sometimes he had to explain it to Watts or sell it to him. And Watts would tweak shit just to make it more of a flavor of what he'd like to present. And a lot of the tweaks made it better, but Dundee was the booker. Dusty was the booker. Crockett could still say, well, you got to use fucking Bunk Harris. I don't know, but Dusty was the booker. Dundee was the booker. These are bigger organizations at this point. Anywho, worst gimmick, the Learning Tree. Nice to see that.
By the way, 2 years in a row for the Learning Tree.
Yeah, well, because it's a tree that's got plenty of fucking
that's the problem.
Fertilizer all around it.
Even the Observer readers have turned on Jericho.
Well, he doesn't fit it. He doesn't fit the people who like the mainstream WWE, more adult, fresher approach now, and he doesn't fit the people that like the trained chimpanzee cosplay wrestling, because he's not doing either. He's just hanging on to get that 10-year fucking contract.
Hey, best gimmick, also 2 years in a row, Tony Storm, followed by Adam Page, the Outrunners, The Rock. I guess if you consider, do you consider just his appearances, he's a gimmick?
He's a gimmick.
Drew McIntyre, Harley Cameron. Again, what's the Drew McIntyre gimmick? He's the best gimmick. What's the gimmick?
It's the way that the people who have learned about this on the internet and from smart folks like Dave, they're calling that his gimmick is that's his persona, his character. He's the evil Scotsman that has a grudge against society or whatever. We like that gimmick. Saya Kamatani. He,
Sounds like a
she,
great
or
gimmick.
it is number 7.
Sounds like a
I
great
don't
gimmick.
know.
Jey Uso, number 8. Again, if we're talking, and Tony Storm, I know there's a lot of people that like those performances. If we're talking about gimmicks that are actually over to the point where he almost became a walking, talking gimmick that sells tons and tons of merch. How does Jey Uso end up at number 8?
With Adam Page at number 2 and a joke underneath tag team, the Outrunners at number 3.
I mean, Jey Uso barely beat out the Beast Mortos.
How about this?
Frank the Lawyer.
Tony Khan paid millions of dollars to bring in the guy from Japan who placed at number 10 for best gimmick, Okada. Did Okada win anything here? Remember, they paid millions of dollars for him last year, right?
That's the gimmick. He's a Japanese legend who took a bunch of money to come and coast.
Yeah, and he was one of the darlings. Look for Okada's name. Look for Okada's name in anything. At number 10 match of the year was him and Ospreay in Orlando. I can't find Okada's made no splash. He is not, not on United States, Canada MVP. No. Japanese MVP. He was number 9 in Japan. He got 13 votes.
Number 9?
He was not a Revolution.
Number 9.
I'm looking for Okada anywhere else. I'm not seeing most charismatic. He certainly won't be there.
Hey, I got to just say real quick, I'm looking at Best Wrestling Book, The Man, Not Just Your Average Girl, what Becky Lynch won over the Brad Baluchian book, which we talked about on the show, The Six Pack, and then the John Langmead book, Ballyhoo, which, I'm sorry, that's on
one of the greatest books I've ever read.
Yeah, that's on the list of the greatest wrestling books ever, not just last year. So, but Becky Lynch must have written a banger, I guess.
Yeah, well, either that or they've got pictures of somebody banging her in the fucking centerfold.
Oh, come on now. I don't know about that. We would have heard something.
I'm still looking for Okada's name in anything. In anything. They spent millions of dollars. He doesn't matter. No one cares. He's number 10 best gimmick because they taught him to say bitch. And Jesus Christ, nothing happening here. Well, there's a guy named Okada that's best booker, but it's not him.
Well, these are the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards. Again, a lot of fans use these as their way to get out their views of what they personally like the best. Looking at these awards, you wouldn't necessarily know that WWE's in the middle of the hottest period of time they've had. But those, I guess.
Oh, wait a minute. Back to best book for a second. Look at number 7, Jim Londos, The Golden Greek by Steve Johnson.
Well, that just came out, though. To be fair, that was like the end of the year.
Well, okay. But if you're going for pro wrestling books to understand the wrestling business, how it came to be, and the biggest star ever in it, read the Jim Londos book by Steve Johnson and Ballyhoo by John Langmead, who Dave is calling Jim Langmead. And
I didn't even notice that.
And I don't think you need to know that much about Becky Lynch or the Wrestling Observer Complete Collection 1989, which came in at number 8. Or the Complete Collection of 1984 that came in number 6. I think you could go with the Londos and Ballyhoo. But anyway, those are those.
The Brad Baluchian book is excellent too, but that John Langmead book is maybe the best wrestling book I ever read. It was fascinating. He captured the story great, but he actually was a great writer. He wrote about it so well. Man.
We got to do what we threatened each other we were going to do and come up with a list of, because people ask us all the time, what can I read to learn about the history of wrestling that's good, or the history of this person? We got to do a list that we put up on the site of all of the approved books from our very discriminatory palates.
I like that. I think we should also have a list of books we disapprove of. Like, don't read this book. This person's full of shit.
Boy, I've already started that list. I could add a few to it.